Okay, another thing that matches with all of this, I believe it should be in the job description of a board member, and definitely I believe should be part of every board member's responsibility and obligation, no matter if it's a working board or a governing board, is their network is so critically important to the organization. So we spend all of this time and effort focusing on their giving, which, like I said, that in itself not a problem, but I think we're very inconsistent across organizations about how do we focus on and prioritize their network.
Welcome to the Choir Genius channel. I am super excited to have Aubrey Bergauer here to speak to us today. She is probably most famous for her work with the California Symphony and growing that organization, but also has recently written this book with the title Run It Like a Business, which I love, Strategies and for Arts Organizations to Increase Audiences, Remain Relevant, and Multiply Money Without Losing the Art. What could be better than that? Welcome, Aubrey.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
So I think implicit in the title of your book is there must be a lot of arts organizations who are not currently running it like a business. What does run it like a business mean to you?
Well, I have to start by saying I used to hate that phrase. I often would hear it, not always, but often would hear it from usually board members bringing their corporate experience in, but not always. Sometimes it'd be a staff person, sometimes it'd be, who knows who, but they would say, you really need to run this place like a business. And I used to kind of take offense to that. I thought it meant I was doing something wrong, or I wasn't doing enough, or all of these hours I'm tirelessly working somehow weren't good enough. And so I just really hated that phrase for a long time until my own journey was realizing, oh, there's so much besides the art that we produce that's necessary to generate the revenue, run the organization, be a strong leader, all these different things, run high-performing teams that are quote-unquote businessy things that matter in terms of us being able to really fund our mission and produce our art the best we can in service to our audience. And so to me, running it like a business is all those different things I named. It's really everything that's surrounding the art itself, but in service to us being able to fund the art, produce the art, deliver the art.
Right, that makes sense. I have always felt that it's super common that people who want to go into running choirs or making choirs happen, why do they do that? It's because they have an affinity for the art, right? Yeah. It doesn't mean that they have any particular training or what's the word? Training or skill in creating that foundation, that financial foundation, for example, organizational foundation that would make an artistic enterprise really flourish.
I think that's absolutely true. So many of us come into these roles, these arts management roles, whether it's a volunteer role or a paid employment role. Many of us, not all of us, fall into these roles later in life. We were trained as a performer, and then later we learn, oh, there's these other responsibilities, other things that need to happen. And so we kind of start to either dabble in that, especially in terms of if you're a volunteer and kind of major way in that way, or if you decide that's not the career path for me, performing that is, and then decide to make the switch, right? So we just kind of sort of stumble or fall our way into these roles. And so I was going to say crazy, what's so kind of crazy to me is that our training as performers is very narrow in that sense. We're trained to be excellent performers. And I say all the time, we need our offstage work and our offstage talent to match that level of skillfulness with our onstage talent.
Is that what happened in your situation? Were you trained as a performer first?
I did train as a performer first. And also, I got kind of lucky maybe in that I learned about arts management roles when I was in high school. I played in my hometown youth orchestra, and very quickly, they went through an executive director change. One day before rehearsal, they introduced to us kids this new person and said a sentence about what that was. And I remember for me, that was the light bulb moment of realizing, wow, there's a job managing all of this, overseeing all of this, and that's what I want to do. I can be a part of classical music, which I love so much, and have this other, what sounded to me like a meaningful role. So for me, since high school then, I've been on this path. In college, double majored music performance as well as business, and even then still hated the phrase run it like a business until some years in.
Right, and of course now it's possible to get a degree in arts management or something. I don't think that was always the case. But I'm glad you brought up volunteers because a lot of the people who would be watching my channel, yeah, some of them are professional, running a larger choir or chorus or what have you. But a lot of these organizations are primarily, if not exclusively, volunteer. Maybe they have a volunteer board and they've got maybe a paid administrator, or some of them have larger staffs. But I would say it's populated a lot with volunteers. Do you think that changes the message of the book in any way?
No, really. I was going to say, I think I have good news and bad news on this. Either way you slice it, I think it doesn't fundamentally change. We still, even for a volunteer-run organization, have an obligation, desire to fund our art. We still need money to pay for some things we do. We still need audiences, unless we want to be a choir that performs into an empty space, which most people, no matter your artistic discipline, want and need an audience. So those kind of strategies of how do we build an audience, grow the audience, if there's revenue attached to that, if you're charging for your performances, how do we maximize that so that it does bring in the revenue we need? How do we grow a donor base? Most arts organizations, volunteer or paid or full-on professional and larger in size, need donors. I mean, you just have bills to pay no matter how many zeros in your budget. So like I said, it's good news, bad news. These same things apply. In some ways, that means the strategies we can talk about and we'll get into today are the same. It's just how do you scale them up or down. But the bad news is that means there's still a lot of work to do. It doesn't matter if you're paid or not. So we'll talk about all that too.
And so I would love to understand what you feel are resources for people where they could go to become better at these things. I mean, of course, they could probably read any one of a dozen different startup business books. I certainly have read a lot of them myself. Or they could watch episodes on the Choir Genius channel. We're just doing a big series on how choirs make money. And I confess that some of the concepts from your book actually seeped into the video that we did on donations that is about to be published pretty soon. But how can people get better? How can people who don't have the business training get better at this quickly?
Yeah, this type of content is a good start. There is a lot of content out there, as you mentioned, consuming what so many people put out there, including your content. This is a huge part of my own work these days. My book, you've already mentioned, is in service to all of my colleagues in the field. I have a lot of training programs. That's a lot of what I do these days. There are so many different, in the world of social media, so many different people we can follow and listen to. Arts Journal I love just for my daily roundup of arts news. That's a free service. So I would say the content is out there in droves. So just like we would search for anything we want to learn more about, Google it, start clicking around, start seeing what piques our interest and go down the rabbit hole, I guess is the advice.
Right. I was actually unaware that you had training programs, which is silly. Bad research on my part.
It's okay, Tom, you just gave me the pitch. I tried to hit it out of the park. It's all good.
So what are some of the training programs that you personally have?
I run it like a business academy. So for anybody who does eventually pick up the book and wants a deeper dive, more of a step-by-step, I give a lot of how-to instruction in the book and a lot of examples, but for anybody who's like, I just want a little more, I want just walk me through the steps one more time, that kind of content, my Run It Like a Business Academy is designed for that. And it's really designed for the people doing the work. So it does get a little more deeper and specific than I was able to be in the book on these strategies in terms of implementation. I have a leadership development training program for anybody who desires to lead others. I'll put it generally like that, whether in a volunteer role, such as a board role or board chair, or in a staff role, or if you're the sole employee at your organization and you're thinking, how do I manage up to a board? How do I galvanize this group of volunteers? All of those topics I cover. It's my up-level leadership development course. And then I have one more that I'll mention, which is my audience development boot camp. And once we start talking about the data and the metrics, that's what that's for. Anybody who's like, I need the quick boot camp. What are the top metrics I should be looking at? How do I cut through the noise and focus on just the things I need to focus on? That's what that program is about. So thank you for asking.
Oh yeah, for sure. Now, before we get into some detail about some of the parts of the book that I enjoyed the most, can you tell us a little bit about your experience with the California Symphony? I think that's probably why most people know about you.
Yeah, I think what's so interesting about that, you're right, that is how I became known, but my journey with these strategies started way before that. And just to quickly share a little bit, when I was earlier in my career at the Seattle Opera, I was the audience development manager. I started practicing as much as I could, like what the role and scope would allow for, strategies like patron retention. I was overseeing our Wallace Foundation grant projects, some of them at least, and that was all about audience experience. So that's a real big other theme in my work. I became very data-driven at that organization, so everything I've come to learn about digital content and being on the forefront of technology, really, all of that started in that role. And then as the career progressed, more responsibility, I kept as more, incorporating more of these strategies, refining them. Then I saw the success is repeated. And at the Seattle Opera, we grew the Young Patrons Club to the largest of its kind in the country through these same strategies. Then I go on to be head of marketing at the Bumbershoot Music and Arts Festival. We increased revenue by 44%, which I remember at the time thinking, I'm never going to see something like that again in my life. Like, Aubrey, you've peaked professionally. You're never going to do it again. Then 2014, I go to the California Symphony because I thought, okay, now is my chance to become an executive director, put everything together. Now I really can work holistically across the organization on all of these different strategies, not just the audience development, revenue, marketing strategies. And there we doubled the audience over 5 years, nearly quadrupled the donor base. Along the way is when I started blogging about it, and see previous question on content out there. That's why, because I thought we need content in this field. Now content marketing is, a decade later, here we are, and still it's very effective, and we both do it. And all of this is to say, that's how I then became known, is because of the content I started producing, and while I was in that role, I guess, is the long-winded way of saying, yeah, famous or not, that's where I became known, I think, for a lot of these strategies.
Got it. Now, one of the big themes in your book is around making a better audience experience, and having read a little bit into it, I know that would be kind of the first step on the way to developing a donor base eventually. So what are some of the ways that choirs and choruses who might be watching this channel accidentally make it add friction to the audience experience?
Yeah, this is an excellent exercise for anybody listening to do, is think about how many touch points, which are potentially friction points, an audience member has before they hear a note of music. So what do I mean by that? Think of all the things, all the steps somebody has to take before they ever hear the first note of the performance. They have to decide going to a choir performance is something they're interested in doing, whether they know somebody performing or they just think it would be a fun night out, like whatever the reasoning is, they take interest, okay? They have to go online, maybe on their laptop, maybe on their phone. This is a whole other bunch of points of friction. Sidebar story, I had a friend of mine, we were going to a local arts organization that I will not name, and he was texting me and he was like, I'm trying to get a ticket and it doesn't work. And I'm like, no, it works. And I'm like assuring him, and he's like, it doesn't work. And and turns out it was the pain point of the mobile website for that organization. So just things like that. Okay, they have to, whether it's mobile or desktop, figure out how to navigate the website. There's a whole body of user experience research I talk about in the book. User experience research, everybody just means going to your users, in our case, our customers, our audience, asking them about how they feel about these different parts of their interactions with us. We learned, this has been replicated many times with clients I've worked with now, but we repeatedly hear things like, when I go to your website, it reads like Inside Baseball. I don't know the words you're using. It feels very jargony. I don't know the composer names you're referring to, like I'm supposed to know what they mean, and they really, the feelings underneath that were, I felt intimidated, I felt lost, these negative emotions associated with the experience. So anyways, you can go on and on with this exercise. Then they have to click through and buy a ticket. Then they have to, day of, decide what to wear. That turns out to be, the research I've done shows, actually quite a big point of friction. And even when you're like, it doesn't matter, even in California, everything's cool, man, whatever. No, such a huge point of anxiety for people. And it's not that they want to dress down. So many people think like, oh, the millennials or the Gen Zers, like they just don't want to dress up. And that's not it at all. They want to fit in. And that's a much deeper emotion of, I want to belong. So anyways, you can keep going down these steps. They have to find parking. They have to do whatever, there's a lot of places that are potential points of friction, some of which we can control, some of which we can't, but kind of the name of the game is, what can we at least partially control? How do we optimize that? Because this all goes back to what you said as you were asking the question, which is, we have to grow our audience before we can grow our donor base. Everybody's like, Aubrey, how do I get more donors? It starts here. It starts right here with making that audience experience as customer-centric as we can.
Yeah, that's one of the things that really struck me reading the book, or what I think is going to stick in my head now, is that there's a lot of people who are interested, vaguely interested in classical music, but don't know anything about classical music. And so if your website is using all these terms that only a really, an expert would understand, I mean, I'll confess, I don't know what a romantic piece is compared to a Baroque piece, although I could kind of make some guesses. So I think that's probably a pretty big deal, but not just for classical music, but for just about anybody, right? Considering if you want new people to come in, they don't know anything about you, and so you've got to meet them where they are.
I think this was probably the biggest aha moment for myself, is realizing, right, Aubrey, why do you preach that the decline in music education in our country is a huge reason why we've seen a decline over the years in our audiences, and yet, Aubrey, you had done nothing to change how you talk about what you present. And like that kind of like crossroads, line in the sand moment, I was like, oh, I have a choice. How am I going to proceed now that I have like learned this information? And we all have a choice. Do we proceed as if everybody, quote unquote, should know these things? Or my choice was to say, right, if it's not dumbing it down, this is like an argument I hear a lot, I don't want to dumb it down. It's not dumbing it down to change the language we use to be more accessible, or vocabulary that's available to more people. It's smart marketing is what it is. And it's not dumbing it down if it was never taught to somebody in the first place. And I'm thinking in my head right now, go back to the top of our conversation, we were talking about how we're trained as performers and then have to make this leap to this quote unquote business world, operations world. And a lot of us don't have that background skill set. I'm like, flip it for our audiences. They do not have that training that we have had as performers. And it takes an incredible amount of empathy. It's not easy, but it takes an incredible amount of empathy to think, how else can I talk about what we're doing on our website, social media, fill in the blank.
Right. So what do you think is the biggest potential source of friction? Like if there's a choir leader, chorus leader watching this right now, what is the most likely big thing that they can fix, in your opinion?
I think it's somebody feeling, it's the hard emotions I mentioned, either intimidated or like they don't belong. Maybe it's the feeling of I don't belong. I mean, that's really hard to overcome if you want repeat business from somebody. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to overcome if they're feeling that way before they even buy a ticket, right? And so that's why user experience research is so important, because we're not going to customers and asking them, how do we solve the problem? We're asking them, how do you feel? Because how somebody feels, that's their personal truth. And so there's no right or wrong barometer. It's like, it's their truth. And so when we can just sort of strip the ego or judgment away, at least I had to when I was hearing these responses, because when people tell you, I go to your website and it reads like Inside Baseball, my first reaction is, and it just really takes a lot to be like, no, for somebody, this was like kind of painful for them. And then, you put your Sherlock Holmes hat on and start thinking, how do I make it less painful? How do I make it so they do want to click through that next step? And for me, then that becomes like marketing strategy brain. Like, how do we, when we reduce the friction, that becomes, I don't know, I get really nerdy about this stuff, but it brings a little more joy into the exercise when I start having compassion for the person who is experiencing those pain points. But to answer your question, I think the feeling of not belonging, wow, that's a hard emotion to overcome if we want to grow our audience.
Oh, absolutely. And do you think that maybe the friction points for audiences are different in a large orchestra compared to a 40-voice SATB choir in a small town?
Well, yes and no. This is an interesting question. I would say probably the answer is not so binary. In some ways, programming probably has something to do with it. Are you programming works that are familiar, or are you not? Okay. But I try to, in my work, really get away from programming being the solution or the problem. We're talking about business strategy, which I said is everything else kind of surrounding the artistic product. So is it the same or not the same? I don't know. I think what I do know is that people's tastes are multifaceted. I like choral music. I like orchestral music. I like top 40 radio sometimes. Like, okay, these are really different styles of music. And sometimes I'm not listening to music at all, right? That is true for like all of us. And so I think to try to make it so specific of yes, it is the same, no, it is not the same, or try to view people unilaterally, that's tricky. The data can help us when we're trying to generalize, that's true too. But at the end of the day, I think it's not so much about the artistic discipline or the product. It's just really going back to optimizing these things around it. And that tends to be more similar than different in my mind.
You talk a lot about data and how we should make decisions based on data rather than on assumptions or how we've always done things. What do you think are the most important data points for a small ensemble or a medium-sized ensemble that they should be looking at right away?
This is exactly what I teach in my audience development bootcamp. I'm going to give you some of it right here for free, everybody. I think, and this, a lot of people are kind of surprised to hear this, but this, if you're tracking with the conversation so far, this will make sense. I think one of the most important metrics you can track is your first-time buyer retention. And so many people are like, why do you say that, Aubrey? We need new donors, right? So we already talked about that. Everybody's like, I need new donors, I need more donors. Here's why first-time buyers matter. Across most artistic disciplines, that number of first-time buyers that do not come back is up to 90%. Now, whether it's that high for your organization or not, run the numbers so you know where you stand, but every single organization I think I've ever worked with, it's the majority of their first-timers never come back. So there's a lot baked into that statement. Let me zoom out. We tend to say as an industry, we need new audiences. We need new audiences. We need younger audiences. I feel like this has been like the mantra for as long as I can remember, over 20 years working in this business. And yet, with a statistic like what I just shared, up to 9 out of 10 of our first-time buyers, our newcomers, are never coming back. That's not a new audiences problem. That's a retention problem. They're coming. They're just not staying. And so this right here to me is like the inflection point from which all these other solutions start to come from. If we can get somebody to come back for a second visit, then the research in our field, the data in our field shows a second visit within 12 months of their first experience, the data shows their lifetime value to our organization skyrockets. So to put this differently, they're never going to become a subscriber if you offer subscriptions at your organization if they don't come back a second time. If they come once and never again, like the deal's off, right? They like decided we are like a first date, never again situation, and or a bucket list item, pick your analogy. If they come back a second time, the relationship continues. They become more lucrative. They're never going to donate unless they've come a second time, right? So all of these future value things we need from our audiences, want from our audiences if we want to grow our revenue, comes because that first time was a success. So that's where we start pairing together the audience experience with this data point of what is our first-time buyer retention? How many of those people who come once every year or come for the first time every year are coming back within 12 months? I would say more than any other metric, start there.
I love the second date analogy. Like, what can you do to get a second date with these strangers, right, who come into your organization? And it just strikes me as so painful, too, because if groups are doing anything, they're advertising. And so then you spend all this money, all this effort on getting people to come once, and then, it's wasted if they never come again.
Yeah, when we talk about strategy, this is a shift in strategy. It's not acquisition all the time. Some of that is needed. But if we really start to focus, and this is so much of what I do in with the organizations I work with in my programs, if we really start to dial in and focus on retention, not only is it cheaper, in any industry it's cheaper to retain a patron, a customer, than it is to acquire a new one, but it's not just cheaper on the expense side, it's more lucrative on the revenue side. So I now say that patron retention is like compound interest. It gets better, it spins up revenue for us faster. Flywheel is another analogy. So anyways, I get really hyper about all this and can talk for a long time.
And so can you share with us an example where some data that you were able to capture and analyze changed some deeply held assumptions in an organization?
Yeah, well, the one I just shared for sure. Whenever I work with an organization and they run their first-time buyer retention rate, usually they're like, wow, I didn't know. Most of us didn't know. So no shame in the game. There is, on the heels of that, there is a free tool on my website. It's a revenue calculator where you can see, okay, if we were to increase our first-time buyer retention rate, let's say it's 10% or whatever it is, 20% to start, whatever your current retention rate is, what if we got that to 30%? What if we got it to 31%? You can play around with it and it does the math of, okay, then this many people will eventually become a multi-buyer, this many people will become a subscriber, this many people, and so you get to see projected out, wow, there's a lot of money on the table if we just focus on this one thing. So anyways, all of that's in that one data point still. I would say another one where people get pretty surprised. I'm trying to think which one to share because there are many actually. Let's talk about website traffic because this goes back to the previous conversation of what are we putting on our websites? Who are we designing those websites for? Is it for aficionados or is it for somebody who's new? Like how do we even know? Well, we know through the data. For most organizations, this is another one that it's just, the question was, what's surprising? This is surprising. How many new visitors are coming to your website versus returning visitors? I remember at the California Symphony doing this exercise, and it was something like, I want to say it was like 70% or something quite high of all of our traffic on the website every year was new. Not new buyers, like new, never been to californiasymphony.org before, ever. And I thought, 70%, like what? And so then I started repeating this exercise now as a consultant, and it's usually very high. Usually that's the one organizations are like, whoa, I had no idea the vast majority of my website traffic was brand new people. So that supports the argument for what are the words we are using, all of those kinds of choices. It also matters because we start thinking like, well, what about our loyalists? Why aren't they coming to our website? Well, the answer is because they already have their tickets. They already have their questions answered, probably. They got the brochure in the mail. They know what's on the program, or they, those kinds of things. And so it just turns out that, wow, we have such a big opportunity once we start digging into some of these data pieces that tend to be revealing moments.
Let's talk about the boards a little bit instead of the people who are executing day to day. I think a lot of the time in a choral organization, there's going to be a board of directors, and one of their primary focuses, of course, is on money and providing the money to make the organization work. And along those lines, sometimes they are asked to donate themselves as a kind of a cultural thing. Sometimes they're expected to connect with other people who may have the wherewithal to donate large sums. In your opinion, what are some of the things people can fix at the board level that would really help make life easier for the organization and for the executive directors in particular?
I think this depends a lot on if it's a working board versus a governing board. So that is where I would say the work of the board differs quite a bit. You were asking earlier, how are organizations different, volunteer versus more professional staff? I would say this board question maybe where the bigger difference lies in my mind. Regardless, I would say I'm trying to think of some, as much as I can, universal things here to answer this question. One, I would say the board can be asking about these metrics. Like if there are board members listening to this conversation right now, please go back to your teams and say, is there a way we can calculate our first-time buyer retention rate? Is there a way we can access Google Analytics or the baked-in analytics to our website host, Squarespace, WordPress, whatever site, whatever platform you're on? Can we look at the visitor traffic? Be the person to say, let's look at these metrics. Okay, that's something a board member can do. I think also, I do believe board members have a fiduciary responsibility. Like by the legal code that defines nonprofits and makes us qualify for 501c3 status, we have to have a board, and the board has to have a fiduciary responsibility. So like it or not, that is our legal structure. And therefore, a lot of times we jump to, well, then how much are they going to give? What's the minimum threshold? What are we expecting? And that's okay. I don't think that's a problem. I think it's important to have expectations for board members. There's a whole other conversation of, what's the job description of a board member? I believe in writing a job description, and when I'm recruiting new board members, say, you have to come to concerts. If there's a minimum gift, you need to do that. Lay it out so somebody can say, yes, I'm in, I get it, or no, that's not for me, and everybody will be happier in the end. Okay. Another thing that matches with all of this, I believe it should be in the job description of a board member, and definitely I believe should be part of every board member's responsibility and obligation, no matter if it's a working board or a governing board, is their network is so critically important to the organization. So we spend all of this time and effort focusing on their giving, which, like I said, that in itself not a problem, but I think we're very inconsistent across organizations about how do we focus on and prioritize their network. And it's so difficult, whether you're a staff of one or have a big team of employees, nobody has the network of a combined board, right? It's just such a powerful asset that a board has together. So when it's time to sell the gala table or sell, bringing people with you to concerts, or it's time to talk about corporate sponsorships, well, who do you know? Who do you know in the community? Like that's what's going to make the corporate sponsorship happen, not some cold outreach with the slide deck. So just time and again, there's so many ways where I'm like, wow, their network really, really matters. Just as much in my mind, if not even sometimes more than the dollar amount on the check they're writing.
Yeah, that makes sense for sure. And so does that lend itself to some ideas about how one should choose board members?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it goes, like I said, I'm really, call it type A or call it consistent about like, these are the expectations. And if you're going to come here and join this team, this is what we need from you. And that has saved me so much grief because, as I mentioned, some prospective board members are like, okay, I totally see what you're asking of me. And also on that list, for me at least, is always, what committee are you going to serve on? And then we get to talk to them. You either know their professional background and have an idea, oh yeah, they're going to be on the finance committee, they're the VP at the community bank down the street, or you're not sure, and you get to have that conversation as part of the recruitment process. That's a wonderful thing too. But then they're coming, no matter what, they're coming in knowing like, okay, I'm here to help serve on this committee. It could change next year, 2 years later if they rotate committees or whatever, but you onboard them faster that way because they have a purpose. So yeah, I think that matters a lot. One other thing I'll just say that I think is important about board members is, and this does go back to the fundraising piece, is I think another, we'll call it big misconception, is that like board members need to be dialing for dollars. And I actually hate asking for board members to do that. It goes right back to, do they have the training and skills to do that? Mostly no, unless they have some background in fundraising, which is not the case for most board members. And so then it's like, well, how do they assist in fundraising then? Okay, we already talked about the network, bringing people in. I really, really love engaging the board in donor stewardship. And
what is donor stewardship?
Donor stewardship, like thanking the donor, basically. The things that happen after the gift is made. So I have had so much success, both with the organizations I've served on staff and with several of my clients now, when we talk about, okay, when somebody comes in as a donor at X level, whatever, $1,000 for your organization, maybe it's higher for your organization, lower, they're going to get a phone call from a board member, and we're going to give them a script. Hi, I'm so-and-so, I'm on the board. I just learned you made a gift to the organization, and I just wanted to be one of the first people to call and say, on behalf of the board and the organization, thank you so much. Like, you can write those words out. Anybody can do it. Anybody can make that call. I cannot tell you how many times this has happened to me and other peers who are executive directors. Then the donor calls or writes and is like, I got the best phone call from so-and-so on my board. And you're like, did you not care when I called you and thanked you? But it's different because it was my job. It's not their job when it's the board member. They took time out of their day to volunteer and make that call of gratitude. And that's what the donor remembers. And that ties into data and research too. The number one reason donors don't renew their gift, number one reason is because they didn't feel thanked enough. So a lot of, we talk about retention, we're talking about stewardship. A lot of all of that on the donor side is about the things that happen after the gift, not the solicitation itself. And the board should absolutely be a part of that in my mind.
Yeah, you can't go wrong thanking people for doing nice things, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about the funnel. I see it as a funnel myself, and there's sort of like a number of different ways people come into an organization the first time. We talked a little bit already about new people coming to a show. One of the things that's a little bit different in the choral world is there's a second big one for most of them, and that is through membership, right? Not that they want to go see a show, but they actually want to do some singing. That's not the same in an orchestra, I guess, because it's not they don't run that the same way
Not
at
as
all.
participatory, yeah.
Yeah, but regardless of how they take that first step, and we remove all the friction from both of those processes, probably. What are some of the key ways that you deepen the relationship over time and culminate in somebody being willing to give you money?
This is exactly what I teach in my long haul model. My long haul model is this exact question of what is the journey, the customer journey, the patron journey, the member journey. What's the journey from start to finish, whatever start to finish is for your organization. And in this journey you're describing, you're saying, well, we have steps where there's a membership, and eventually we want those members to become donors. Okay, so there's a lot to say about this. Like I said, I teach a whole course on it, and it's in my Run It Like a Business Academy. But for here, the short takeaway for everybody is just think about if you can map out these different steps, what would that be? In your mind, kind of the sequential journey, ideal journey, it doesn't have to be what everybody does, but sort of in your mind, what that would look like. And then you have to start thinking, okay, how do I get them from A to B? Not start to finish, but membership to donor in this case? If membership is A and donors B, or is there a step in between? Should be new member to they keep their membership for more than a year. Maybe that's the next step, right? And so you have to think through, what are these different steps of the journey? How do I get them from becoming a new member, signing up, joining, giving us their credit card for the first time, to staying with us for over a year and continuing that membership? Okay. Am I getting this right, by the way? Am I like kind of understanding or no?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
You're literally the expert in many of these cases.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I was understanding the membership model for the choruses. So then whoever's doing this exercise, you can think as an organization, as a board, as a staff, as a team, okay, if we want them to renew that membership for more than a year, what does that look like? It goes back to, what are those pain points? Why are they falling off? What's the friction? What's the renewal rate? What's our baseline? And then you can start matching some of these other things we've talked about. Well, they didn't feel like they had enough communication after the purchase. Oh, okay, we can work on that. What are the communications we're going to send after their first purchase? What are the communications we're going to send leading up to that 1-year renewal? Or I don't know, I'm kind of riffing and making this up, but those are the questions of if A to B is the step we need them to take. We're not talking about A to C. We're not talking about donations just yet. We're just talking about A to B, whatever that is. What's preventing them from B? And how do we solve for that and reverse engineer that? That's the exercise.
So it's a lot of communicating with people, finding out how they feel, gathering data, and also tracking all of that data. And I can just imagine people watching this and thinking, there's no way that I could possibly track all of that data, because the only way they know how to do that is in a spreadsheet. And they're quite rightly thinking to themselves, this would be way too much work, it's too error prone, I can't possibly bite this off. But then that's where tools come in. And so surely, what are some, first of all, do you agree with that statement? You need some tools to do a good job of this at scale? For sure.
At scale, for sure. You need tools. I think the best way to start is a baby step. I work with organizations all the time we're here to run a marathon, not a sprint. So if somebody is feeling overwhelmed, which I think is a normal response to hearing all of this, then the answer is not try to do everything. The answer is, or go cry in the corner because it feels overwhelming, arts administrator life over here. But
we've all been there.
Yeah, we've all been there. And so then the question is, okay, what's the smallest, babyest step we can take? Okay, now tools. We are lucky now. We are in an age where there are so many tools available. 10 years ago, when I started blogging about all of this stuff, we were doing a lot in a spreadsheet. We were lucky. We had some real Excel wizards on staff. We had a CRM, but the CRM was not crunching all the numbers the way we needed. And anyways, we don't have to do that in 2026. We are so, so lucky. If nothing else, I would say this is where AI can help us. ChatGPT, Claude, pick your favorite. As an analysis tool, you can upload data. You can it can be messy even. It can be reports you pull from your CRM, and you tell it what you need it to analyze for you, and it will do it. The fact that that's available to us in 2026 is such a game changer, no matter the size of the organization. So I would say start there. Just know that these tools today, even if it's a free tool, free version of one of the AI platforms, is a really great asset that we can use these days.
Hey, thanks for watching that whole episode. I had a great time talking to Aubrey Bergauer, and I know you got a lot of value out of listening to that whole episode and everything she has to say about making choirs better. So like that video if you liked it, and subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss anything else that we put out in the future. Don't forget to check out past episodes on the Choir Genius channel as well. Lots of great stuff there. And finally, who would you like to see us interview? Maybe yourself, maybe somebody else famous in the choir world. Let us know in a comment down below, or just reach out and we'll try to make that happen. And finally, don't forget, this channel is sponsored by Choir Genius, and so if you're looking to make your choir better in a real practical, day-to-day way, then check out Choir Genius. Have a great day.